A recap on collections, because we're going to look at collections quite a bit today. They are a place to store data within the app, and they behave quite like a data source, in fact, almost exactly like a data source. And you populate them using the collect function, and you empty them out using the clear function. You can do both of these functions at the same time by using the clear collect function. So that's kind of like filling your bucket, emptying your bucket, and then filling your bucket again. So yeah, straight on to how to update data. I'm doing something that I told you I was doing something a wee bit different again. I'm going to create an app in a different way. I'm going to, if you've not seen Project Oakdale yet, I'm going to create the app in Project Oakdale. So this might be new to you. It's worth seeing. The interface once you get in there is very similar, but it's worth just seeing what it is, see what all the fuss about, because everybody seems to be talking about it just now. So I wanted to see what the fuss was about as well. I thought I'd just run this session from Project Oakdale. So this is my Teams environment. I've got a sales team. I'm not going to create a sales team app, funnily enough, but I'm going to add the Power Apps app. And you just go to this ellipse here, add the Power Apps. Like I say, it's not a session on Project Oakdale just now, because it's still in preview. I'll wait till it's out of preview before I do any sessions with them, because it'll probably change. But it's just interesting to create an app in a new way. And again, if you've not seen it, it's worth seeing what all the fuss is about. So we can create an app by clicking Create App. And we will attach it to our sales team. The first time you run this, it takes a wee while to provision the database and everything in the background, but I've done this before on this team. So click Create, it takes us into a sort of version of our Maker Studio, the Maker portal, the Maker Studio, whatever it is you call it. We'll give our app a name, we're going to call it TV Shows, so very salesy. Now, the best way of learning Power Apps is just to pull some controls onto the canvas. Project Oakdale does a lot of that for us as well. So this is our pre-built app template that we get with Project Oakdale. We'll create a table in the back by clicking Create New Table. And I'm going to call the table we're going to be working with today is Characters. And we'll keep name column in there. Like I said, so this is just showing you, not a full session on Project Oakdale, but to add columns to your table, they're called tables in Project Oakdale rather than entities, but the same thing really. And you click plus, we'll call it color. And we'll make it a choice, so not an option set. If you're used to CDS and Dynamics, it's called a choice in Project Oakdale. So let's do red, green, add some colors in there, blue, orange. I'll do is just now, and we're going to leave it as that. That creates a table in the background. And I would create another data set. So I'll quickly add data, create new table. Let's do shows. So I'll create a table called shows in the background, and we're just going to have a name. And I'm actually just going to add some TV shows in there. So we're going to say PJ Masks again, because that is my world right now. And we'll do TMNT for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Because that also takes up quite a lot of my time. I'm also going to go, the reason I created the character data set first, that's a child of the TV shows, is because it automatically populates all the controls with the characters data set. It saves me having to change everything, change all the stuff in the background of the fields and stuff. So let's click edit data, and we will add another column here. We're going to create a relationship here to the shows entity table. Sorry. Okay, we're just putting things in so we can look at data and then play with it, play with some of the functions. Let's look up. And there we go, shows. So that's us now got to look up to shows. So let's have a look at what we get here. We now get a gallery on the side and the data source's characters. Let's just populate that gallery because we want to see some of the data that we're putting into our data source. We will change the views, sorry, not views. So I want to change the layout of the gallery just to title, subtitle, and body, and we'll put our fields on there. So we'll do color and TV show. If I can find it. Might have to do it up here. And our text field. That's nice. That's not good. That's it. TV shows. I said anything can happen. A different interface it can throw you. And we'll put name in there. So let's just see how if that shows. So that edit some data, put some data in there, and let's put gecko in there. Will display it? There he is there. Okay, and we'll delete him back out. Okay, so what else do we get? We get a gallery. So this is our data source, and we'll create another gallery for our collections in a second, just so we can understand what's going on. And we get a form, and this is what we're going to be talking about today, forms and then saving collections. So if we have a look at the main properties in the form, because it's the first time we've looked at forms within Power Apps Nice, we see the data source. That's a key property of the form, and that points to characters. Project Oakdale does all this for us. We get two columns, one for name, one for color. Why have we got three? It's not got a field. Let's keep that as three, and we'll add some fields to that form. One field. TV shows. So there we have a form. So we can start adding data to this form. And we've got this new record function here, but let's focus on the form again. So we've got data cards, name, color, and TV show, and that's where we enter our data. And we have this icon here, which allows us to edit our form. So that opens the edit form. If we have a look at the properties on forms again, let's have a look. There's another important one that we need to look at called default mode. Because a form can be read-only or it can be editable. So we've got this is quite a good example here because it sets the default mode of the form based on some other properties. So we have new, edit, and view in there. And we'll add a label just so we can see what's happening. At the top here, let's just put form mode. Just make things a bit more visible. And the name of our form is edit form 1. We get that from our tree. So we'll select that as edit form 1. So label. Display mode. And we can see that that form is in view mode. So if I click preview, it's in the view. We've not got any records selected anyway. But let's then have a look at what other functions we've got. Sorry, if we click sorry, it's item. The item's a good one to look at. That tells us that what record we're looking at in our data set. In our data sets here, we've not got any, so let's start adding records to the data set. But you can see that the record depends on what's selected here by this function here. We don't worry too much about this function just now. Let's go ahead and add a new record, and we'll add Gecko again from PJ Masks. He's green and he's in PJ Masks. And let's just stop previewing that just now, because I have a look at this icon here, this tick icon. This is the submit form function. So that tells that control submit, so it runs the submit form function, and that's the form it's going to submit. So when that submits, Power Apps does a lot of the work for us. We click submit and it creates our record in our data set, and that actually creates the record. So if I go into the data source, we can see we've got Gecko green PJ Masks. We'll preview again. If we select that and click the edit icon, we can see that our form mode's in edit mode. We can go ahead and edit that. And it does all the work for us. So that's straight out of the box as a template. If you put a form on the canvas, you get all that functionality done for you. So how does it work with collections? Because we're writing directly to the data source here. Well, let's create some collections. And before we do that, we'll just copy this gallery, because we want to be able to differentiate what's what's in our collection and what's in our data source. So this is, I've just Control V, Control C there. And I'm going to make this a bit smaller. And I'm going to add some labels just so that we can see what's happening. Let's call that our data source, and we'll make that bold. And this top one, we can Control V there, so Control C, Control V, and we'll call that collection. Okay, so remember, if you last time, if not, you can catch the YouTube video. But we created those collections on the start of our app. We just do that in the same way here. So we go to app, we're going to on start, and we're going to clear collect. I'm going to call it character collection, because we don't want it to be the same name as our data source. And we're just going to collect everything that's in characters. And we'll point this gallery. So select the gallery. Oops. Change the data source to, actually what we'll do, we'll run that first. We'll run that on start and check that we've got data in there. Oops. See, looking at the wrong place. Where is it now? Collections. Yeah, so we have Gecko in our collection. So let's point this at character collection, and there's our collection there. Let's just make sure we've got the right fields up there. I think we have. Yeah. So now we've got a collection. This is what a collection is, and this is what's in our data source. If we add another one, what we'll do, we'll point the form at the collection as well. And if we go to preview and click new record, we're going to add an item to our collection. So we will add Catboy. Catboy's blue, and he's part of PJ Masks. Submit form, and yeah, so we can see that Catboy's added to our collection, but he's not added to our data source, and that's what we expect. And as long as we edit that, again, we can change the color to be incorrect. So I've got the right fields up there. Actually, let's change that. And yeah, there we go. There we go. So yeah, as we add and edit data, it only saves it to the collection. It will never ever go to the data source. In order to get it to go into the data source, we need to do some more work. We need to use a function called patch to patch that data into the data source. So let's have a look at the patch function. Again, the best way to do it is just to drag controls onto the canvas. So we will put a button. That's shown up there. I love how Project Oakdale actually styles it as a team style button as well, which is cool. Change the text property of a button to save. I'll put another button up there as well. Oops. Which will just clear the collection, just to save us keep doing it. Oops. Clear. So we've got a save and we've got a clear button. Oops. On the select the clear one, again, we did this last session. We're just going to clear characters collection. So that'll wipe it out. Hold down Alt to preview and click clear. It gets rid of our character collection. Again, our data source is untouched because we're not saving anything back. So let us add some data to our data source again. Hit preview, new record, and we'll add a turtle this time. Who will we add? We'll add Michelangelo because he has fun. And he's orange. And he's a turtle. So like I said, Power Apps does all that for us. It saved it to the collection. But we want to save this now to our data source. And how do we do that? We need to edit the save button. The Power Apps actually makes it quite easy for us to do this. We'll add to the onSelect. We use the patch function. Because we've created our collection from our data source, we've just went and collected everything in our data source. The collection and the data source contain the same columns. So like I said, Power Apps keeps it quite simple for us. We're going to patch. If you look at the properties here, the variables, sorry, that takes the source. That's the source that you want to patch. We're going to patch the character source. It's expecting a record, but again, because our columns are exactly the same, we can just do character collection. And that should do. So if we preview and click save, Michelangelo gets added. Now remember, we're not clearing this collection. Remember we looked at that last session. If you keep hitting save, it's just going to keep adding Michelangelo. So we need to put another value in there to clear our collection out once it's done. And we use the clear function. We also need a wee semicolon. So we're going clear character collection. What we'll do, we'll just clear that just so we don't get any duplicates. And again, Power Apps does most of the hard work for us, because if I then let's just add another one. Let's add Leonardo. He's blue. He's a turtle. Let's make him a PG mask. Let's get it wrong. Let's see if it updates. So we've got Leonardo. He's not in our data source, but we can hit save. He'll appear. and they'll stay there. So what we're going to do now, that again, that's fine as long as the columns stay the same, as long as the collection and the data source have the exact same columns. If they're different, in which case it might be, because especially if you're pulling data from different data sources in your Power App and merging tables together, or even if you're creating a collection that doesn't want to go and get all the data first, your columns may well be different. So that's what we'll do. We'll remove any reference to this collection first, and then we'll just start from the collection without getting all the other fields. And we'll see how we can save the collection that way, because this is where we start coming into different problems. So we've got our data source there. We will take away our on start. So we're not collecting that anymore. And we get loads and loads of errors. And then what we'll do as well, I'm just going to hit preview and hit new record, because I'm just going to copy this icon. So just Control V. Again, this is just for demonstration purposes. Control C, Control V, move it along with the arrow keys. I'll just change it to a plus using this icon property here just to differentiate it from everything else. So what I'm going to do when I click the plus, I'm going to add the contents of this form into our collection. And again, remember, we don't have a collection at the moment, so it doesn't know what fields, and that's why we've got all these errors here. So on the select of our plus icon here, we'll get rid of the submit form, because we're not going to use that, and we'll use the patch function again. So we'll say patch. The data source that we're going to use is we're not going to patch, we're going to collect. Sorry, we're going to add something to the collection. So we covered collecting things last week. We're going to collect, and the collection we're going to do is the show. Sorry, not show. Characters collection. So the same name as before, hopefully. And then we're going to add items. So like we did last week, these are curly braces, and we start specifying the columns that are going to make up our collection. So we'll keep them much the same. We'll say name is, and we can have a look at this form here. So this is how the form made up. These are called data cards. The field that we want is the data card value 1. Should probably rename our fields at some point. Data card value 1 dot value. Comma, we'll create another column, which will be the color. And which one is that one? That's probably going to be 2, data card value 2. Dot selected item. So selected dot. Remember which ones they are. So data card value 2 dot selected dot value. Do you want the value of that to go into your collection? And then imagine this will be data card value 3, and it is. And you see your errors disappearing here as you start building your collection. So what we'll just call it TV shows. Let's just put, yeah, and that is data card value 3. And selected again. So that's us collecting some data. What have we got? What's wrong here? Ah, yeah. So let's preview it and we'll use our plus icon to add some data. Before we do that, actually, we'll just clear this data set down so that it's empty, just so you can see it again. Okay. So let's add my favorite is gecko. It's green, it's PG mask. And we'll use this plus icon, so we should collect that and add it to this collection. And there he is. So again, this is our collection, or almost like a data source that's within the app that has gecko associated to it. And we've used that just by using the collect function. So how do we get that now into the data source? Well, we can add it by going to the save icon. If we try and do the patch again, it just won't work. And it's because the columns don't match. So if you look at the collection in the back, you've only got 3 columns there. You've not got the whole created on. There's a load of other columns in the background that's in the data source. And because they don't match exactly, it's just not going to work. So what you have to do a bit of formula to do that. And you also, there's a few different ways of doing it, but this is what I find is the best way. Because if we're comparing this data source here to this data source, so we want to create records that are there and update records that are in there as well that we find that are matching. So we're going to add another column to our collection which isn't in the data source. We're going to call it ID. So, and the ID is just going to be the name again, but you can add a unique ID as long as it's something that's shared with the data source. But we're just going to keep it as a separate field because it gets confused if you just look up to the name again. So we'll say ID equals and data card 1.selected value. Oops. What is it? Because I'm missing money. Let me see. Why am I getting an error? Ah, there we go. That's what it is. A curly brace in the wrong place. That rhymes. So now when we create our character, that is blue, and we have a look at the collection. You can see he also has an ID, and the ID is the same as his name. Again, as I said, it can be anything as long as it's shared between as long as the name of the column isn't the same, but it does look up to the data source. So again, our save's not going to work. So we need to do some formula there because what we need to do a patch, but we need to look at all the records within our collection, go through each of them. So kind of like a for each if you're familiar with code, but we use for all in this case. So we're going to say for all the characters in our collection, have a look at the data source and see if you can find a matching character with that ID. If you don't find it, you want to create the record. And if you do find it, you want to update the record. So let's see what we can do. So we start our formula with the for all function. And then we're going to, if you look at the for all function, it says what source are you using. The source we're using is our collection. So that is characters collection. Source. So then we get prompted to add our formula. I like to just go down to another line for this. We're going to use an if statement. I'm not going to do what each of these use, as you'll find out how as you use Power Apps, you'll find out how to use each of these functions. There's quite a lot of different wee functions in here. We want to say if we only look at the data, say if we can't find anything that matches that ID in the name column, then do something else. So we need to use is blank, and then we need to do a lookup to that table and use the lookup function for that. So we'll say lookup, and we're looking up the data source, so it's characters. So we're saying look in this data source for a name equals ID. So for each one of these, it's going to pick up the first one first. Well, it actually does it all at the same time, I think. It's going to say, look at Catboy, find the record that's in Catboy. If that is blank, so if it doesn't find a record, we are in there. We're going to create the record, and we've got another patch function to run here because we're creating a new record. So we're going to patch. And when you create a new record using patch, there's no like upset in patch. You can't just say, find a record. If it's not just one formula to find a record and update it. You have to say patch create a new record, and you need to use the default function. So we're going to say patch the characters data source. The next value where it says record, we're going to input a special function called defaults. And what that does, that tells the patch to create the record, and it creates the record with the default values for all the other fields that you don't specify. So what we'll do, we'll specify our columns and our fields to update. Defaults will populate everything else based on the default value as set on the data source. So we're going to say default characters, and then we finish our patch by naming the columns the same as we do with a collect. So curly braces in the right places. We're saying name equals the name column. TV shows, it's the TV shows column, and color is the color column. One of the things that I got caught out here, because I was just so used to using IntelliSense when I was learning this, is that there's a function called this record. So if I show you here, so color equals, for some reason, I was just so tempted just to do this record dot color. But that will actually find the record, take the value of the record within the characters data source, because I was thinking it was within the for all that it would find. So that's something that I spent ages pulling my hair out at. So we just say color, and it's clever enough to pick it up for you. So that's us patching those columns there. First name is the data source, the second name is the collection that you're patching. And put a colon in there just to, because we've got quite a long formula here. So we're doing a patch, then that's if this is true, then create the record. If it's false, we will do another patch. But we need to find the record, and we'll use that lookup again that we used here to find the record based on the ID. So we'll say patch lookup characters name equals ID. And again, we just specify what fields. So I think I missed a bracket there. No, I think I'm right. Sorry, I know what I've done. I have or patching characters. Forgot the first property. The data source is the first property. The record is lookup characters where name equals ID. And then the update that we're making is the same as this bit here. And I think that we're good on that one now. Make sure I've got the right numbered brackets in here. A semicolon. What am I missing? Ah, yes, I'm missing this, another bracket. It's annoying that you can't format it before you actually finish writing it. If we format the text, it's easier to look at. So we see we're doing quite a bit in there, quite a bit of new formulas. Oops. We're saying for all characters in this collection, if we can't find the name based on the ID, create a new one with those values and use the default values for everything else in the data source, because that tells us to populate all those fields, and that helps as well. So if you're working with required fields that maybe aren't in your Canvas app, you'll get an error from the data source saying that you can't save the record because you've got a required field. And maybe if you don't want the required field in your Canvas app, sometimes you don't, you need to use that default, so I'll just populate it based on its default value. And then you're going to patch. If it is found, you're going to update it using the patch function and then clear it down. So let's not clear it down so that we can maybe show you updates working as well. So let's try that. If we click save, we should see PJ masks that way in there, and it comes down. And let's see if I can do an update to Catboy as well. Let's change Catboy's color to purple and save. So that should update Catboy down here. Famous last words. Oops, not got color on. Let's just look in the data source and see what he's saying. Ah, isn't updated. Hold on. That's because I haven't added into the data set. So clear. So we've got Catboy. Let's do that column and then make sure we're doing it right. So Catboy is blue, is PJ masks. We're going to add to the collection. We're saying he's purple, so it should find Catboy and change his color to purple. So that's us creating records and updating records in bulk from creating a collection in our Canvas app and then firing all that data over to our data source. And that's it for today. Like I said, it's quite a lot to go through and it's quite a lot of moving parts in there. The patch function I found when I was learning it, quite difficult to get my head around, especially the defaults part and the update, the bulk update. But it's certainly worth playing around with because, like I said, in our next session, we're going to look at offline data and we'll be, again, working with the data in our app and saving it in bulk to the data source once we're back online. And we get some help out with that one from our fellow admin, David Small. So I'll just finish up by on a few slides. In summary, again, it's a lot to fit into such a short session. I hope we've explained it well. Watch back if I haven't, or ask any questions. We've looked at form mode. Again, that was the easy way. We just point the form at the data source. The form modes view and new and edit. We looked at the submit form function. When you use a submit form and pass in the name of the form, then you again write directly to the data source or the collection. And then we got a bit more complicated because we looked at patching the data and you really only use that when the columns in your either on your form or your collection doesn't match. We looked at defaults which is the function which creates the new record. It tells the patch function to create the new record. Regardless of whether one's found or not, it will try and create a new record. So if you're working with CDS and you've got, you're working with goods and things like that, you might get errors. And then we looked at for all, and that's kind of like a for each encode. It just gets all the items in your collection, or even your gallery or your data source, and goes through and applies a formula to each of them.